It's finally October, which means spooky season. Or if you're a little bit like me, this is like every month of the year, but still. In this month, I want to talk more about like spooky books. So in today's video, I wanted to give you my personal top 5 books, including vampires. And these are in a particular order, and I have tried to include some more heavy books and a few more light books, so you get a little bit of a difference between the styles of vampire books. And if you have seen any of my other videos, then you might already know that I love vampires. Vampires are one of my favorite themes in books, and I am actively looking for more books with vampires. So if you have any recommendations, then feel free to let me know in the comments. I would be so grateful if, thanks to you, I will discover one of my next favorite reads. So know that all of the recommendations in the comments are super appreciated. Now let's start this top 5 with The Witch and the Vampire by Francesca Flores. This is one of the easier reads of this top 5, and it is, I think this could be considered young adult, although I personally consider it an adult fantasy book because some of the themes in this book are just a tiny bit heavier. It is a little bit of a Rapunzel-inspired book, as in the main character is in a tower and she wants to escape and everything that happens around it. This book has a lot of like the fantasy elements that I personally like. It has witches, it has vampires, it has a more medieval setting, it has forest scenes, which I personally really love when there's like nature included in fantasy books. This is also a standalone book, which I think is really nice because nowadays you have trilogies and more parts to books, and I feel like every now and then I like to just read one book which is like a start and a finish and complete it on its own. So number 5 on this list, The Witch and the Vampire by Francesca Flores. On spot number 4, I actually have 2 books, but that's because I read them together. It is King of Battle and Blood and Queen of Myth and Monster by Scarlett St. Clair. If you are into spice, if you like romantasy, then these are the books for you. I personally give these books a 3 out of 5 spice rating because there is a lot of it in it. It isn't super explicit, but it happens a lot. In the first book, we follow Adrian, who is a vampire king, and Isolde, the princess of a kingdom, as they meet because the father of Isolde, the king, actually wants to prevent a war between their kingdom and the kingdom of the vampires, of which Adrian is the king. So they decide to make a sort of peace treaty instead of fighting each other. So in this book, we follow the scene setting, we get a little bit of background on each character, and then in the second book, it actually continues further onto the themes that were already talked about in this book, but in this book we follow more of the vampire perspectives. I personally think these are pretty good. They are not 5-star reads, they are a 3 to 4-star read for me. They are very entertaining, they were very quick to read, and I'm pretty sure there's a part 3 to this series announced as well. It isn't out yet though. On spot number 3 is a classic vampire novel. It is Dracula by Bram Stoker. This is the book that started it all for most of the vampire lecture that I have read. This was a book that I read when I was still in school. It wasn't like something I had to read, but something I wanted to read. And I remember I was blown away by it. Remember, this is before I saw any of the Dracula movies. It's also before I saw any like vampire themed movies such as Underworld. So this book quite literally started everything vampire related for me. In this book, we have the classic Dracula story. I do think the book is more horror-based than the movies are, because like in this you can feel like the suspense, the build-up, as you don't really know what's going on. It is very well written, and that's why I can still, after it being a classic for so long, highly recommend it. I personally don't feel like I could have a vampire book video without including this one, so here is Queen of the Damned by Anne Rice. Now, I could have included 10 books by Anne Rice because she's written so many vampire-themed books. I think her most popular one is Interview with a Vampire, but I personally find Lestat a little bit annoying in that book, so I personally prefer Queen of the Damned. It's also one of my all-time favorite movies, and just the music for the movie was I love it. And in the book, I feel like the suspense and the horror of it all is built up a lot more. And the thing I also really liked is like how it's linked to present day. So you have this part which is like history, horror, vampire based, and then you have a part that is like in the now setting. I think this was in the 90s, so not now, but like recent setting. And I personally think that this is and will be one of my favorite Anne Rice books that I've ever read. So if you haven't read it yet, I do recommend it. It is a fair chunk of a book. It is very easily accessible. Same with Dracula. I think I paid €2 for my copy of Dracula, and this book, I think I got it from a friend actually, because I didn't own a physical copy of it yet. So yeah, it's very easy to find. It is very accessible if you want to read it. And I think this is a very good 5-star read. And this supposedly is the 3rd book in the Vampire Chronicles by Anne Rice, but by no means do you have to read them in order to be able to follow what is happening. If you've been around a little bit longer on my channel, the top 1 on my list will come as no surprise. My personal favorite book at this moment with vampires is Empire of the Vampire by J. Kristoff. This book, this chunk of a book, blew me away. It is a refreshing yet true to vampire story where the vampires are portrayed the way they are with Anne Rice and the way they are in Dracula. They are not just this over-romanticized characters as they are in some other books such as Adrian X Isolde. This book is written so well. It is written in an interview style, so you actually follow the main character as he is answering questions, telling his life story for the person interviewing them. There are a little bit of breaks every now and then with the interview, so you have like a little bit of real-time action happening between the person interviewing and the person being interviewed. I think this is a magnificent book. It has gorgeous illustrations. It has such good world building. And at first I was like, is this going to be a standalone book? So when I finished it, I started looking up, is this going to be a standalone book? And I started following J. Kristoff on Instagram. And he actually not too long after it announced that this will be the first book of a trilogy. So I'm so excited because I want to learn and read more about this world. So the second book, Empire of the Damned, is coming out soon, and there will be a part 3 as well. If you want to pick up only one book from this entire video, I would highly recommend it being Empire of the Vampire. I read through this book so fast. It was such an easy read. I was hooked from start to finish, and I cannot wait for the other parts of it to come out. So this is my current personal top 5 books with vampires in them. I did try to give you a little bit of variation with books, having The Witch and the Vampire be a lot more easygoing, easy read, not as gory, not sexualized at all. And then of course including some classics, also having a little bit of that romantasy. And of course my all-time favorite book, I think, Empire of the Vampire, which I think if you like vampires, if you like vampire stories, is a must read. If you have any other recommendations of books with vampires, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. As I mentioned, I love getting recommendations from you. I've got some of my recent favorite reads from your recommendations, so feel free to leave them. I really, really appreciate it. Give this video a big thumbs up if you liked it, and of course don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon with a new video. Bye!